At this time, I would like for you guys to underline Frederick Jackson Turner and the significance of the frontier in American history. I'm going to go ahead and do that right here and a little bit right here. Now, this is a book written by this historian right around the turn or very close to the end of the 19th century, 1893. But it revolves around these themes that have been identified, have been expressed, but we're exploring them a bit deeper, I guess, from a historical perspective, as opposed to observing some type of phenomenon that was taking place. And that phenomenon I'm speaking of is manifest destiny. This was this phrase coined by a journalist to kind of describe America's desire to move westward, almost under this impression that it was a divine mission. You know, like this was God's plan for Americans to venture out west and occupy all that they see in front of them, whether regardless of what barrier or regardless of the frontier in front of them. Whether it was a mountain range, whether it was the landscape, whether it was the animal, and then unfortunately, whether or not if there were humans already there. And I'm talking about Native Americans. The significance of the frontier in American history is an important book because it kind of, it historically describes America's projection based on those attitudes. You can kind of tell where we're going with this. So we'll start off with British colonial America, the 13 colonies, right on the eastern seaboard. And it's only after we are victorious in the American Revolution that we push those borders. Remember, if you're not aware, but in 1301, there was a great deal of problem that we couldn't move past the Appalachian Mountains. Well, now that the British are gone, now we can. And of course, this is going to bother a great deal of the people that are already in that area, and that would be the Native Americans. And they're worried about that, and understandably so. But we push our borders as far as we can. We push that frontier past the Appalachian Mountains into what we knew to be Louisiana, which was under the control of the French. But thanks to the Louisiana Purchase made in 1803 from France and Napoleon, we're able to secure all of that land and continue to push our frontier even further west. And again, this implies a great deal of movement, trailblazing, pioneering, occupying, and conquering the landscape, and Native American life will have to pay the price for that. And so, manifest destiny is seen as a positive to some, but there are definitely some negatives as an outcome. But our frontier is moving westward, and we'll continue to move westward until the Mexican-American War, where we are able to secure the border of Texas at the Rio Grande. We're able to secure the Mexican Cession, which includes California. And now we've pushed our frontier from sea to shining sea. Every single time America has encountered a frontier, we continue to push further and further westward, finding new frontiers. So the question that is asked of this book is, what happens when the frontier disappears? Because it has. So what do we do? Where do we go? And if we take into account the attitude of Americans, that will not stop them. It gives off the impression that they will find new frontiers beyond the continental United States. And this is kind of indicating that America has desires to be an empire when you control land or territory outside of, I guess, your traditional or original borders. And we can see the impact of the frontier and the psyche of the American mind all the way up to the presidency of John F. Kennedy, who identifies his administration or his goals as not the final frontier, but the new frontier. This new frontier, where the possibility of exploring space and landing on the moon becomes evident. And if you're familiar, or if you are aware of sci-fi, like a show called Star Trek, they would often make the argument that space was our final frontier. So all of this revolves around America's desire to move westward and how that generally benefited Americans at the time. However, um, at what cost? What benefits one group of people might be catastrophic or destructive to another group of people. Um, but by and large, what I want you guys to take away from Frederick Jackson Turner's book, The Significance of the Frontier in American History, is that America will continue to find new frontiers in search of new opportunities, in search of uh, new resources. And then, unfortunately, it leads to the exploitation or devastation of the landscape in some communities. With that being said, please underline the Bureau of Indian Affairs. Now, in reference to Native American life, Americans moving westward has never been a positive for the Native American experience. What it entails is Americans fighting, killing, in order to secure what they ultimately want, which is the land, which was held by Native American tribes all throughout what we now know to be the United States. And therefore, there's going to be conflict. If one group of people want something and the other group of people have something, there's going to be a fight. People could refer to this as theft. You can ask for it, you can try to buy it. If they're not trying to sell it, then you go over there and physically try to take it. Well, I don't, in the court of law, you can call that what you want to call it. But this will happen a lot. Whether Americans are moving south, most of it is when they're moving west. And there's going to be a concern or a problem here because after you engage in that type of conflict and you happen to kill a Native American and you don't kill the children, well, then the children grow up and they remember that devastation, that destruction, those traumatic moments, and then they too want revenge. They want to make sure that they're not being pushed any further. And so each and every new generation, we're creating or I should say, with every conflict, we're creating a new generation of resistance over and over and over, because the reality is that Americans are speaking a language of violence. So ultimately, there comes a decision that is made by the federal government in an attempt to eliminate these type of generational conflicts. And that's where the Bureau of Indian Affairs comes into play. Now, what we need to know off the bat is that this is a government agency. So let's pay very close attention to that concept. This isn't just some random group with private interest and making money. This is a government agency. And with this agency, they're going to establish boarding schools where Native American children are removed from their negative influences of their parents and tribes. And so what are these negative influences? Well, why is your name Black Hawk? Why is your name Sitting Bull? Why is your name Morning Sun? We need to switch that up. That something that everybody else, mainstream society can understand. Something like a John, something like a Trevor or a Timothy. And what are you dressing like? And is that appropriate for a better future for yourself? We got to take that in consideration. Yeah, it'd be good for you to understand English a lot better. So we want to give you new names. We want to give you a new approach because let's be honest. How much of your parents' approach, your grandparents' approach, how much has that really benefited you? Not much. So what we're doing is we're trying to establish a framework, a foundation for you to be able to succeed in this modern day society, because that's what we want for you. We're not trying to hurt you, Timothy. We want you to be better. And then we stop. Better? What's better? Me acting like you? Me being more like you? That in pursuit of, I guess, this so-called success or betterment, I lose my former or my heritage, my identity. Is that better for me? I mean, I don't know. I'm 10 years old. I'm 12 years old. If I decide to listen to this because it does seem like it's a bit more productive or lucrative, how will my people see me? Like a sellout? If I accept a lot of this and work towards these goals that the Bureau of Indian Affairs have for me, will I ever be accepted? Or am I still that outsider that's trying to act like the rest of America? And so, that's a difficult square to circle. One thing is for sure is that when you teach young people in this capacity, with that headspace, they'll grow up and then teach it to their kids all on their own. You may not have to teach that anymore in the schools. And it becomes this self perpetuating, self reinforcing paradigm that slowly erodes traditional Native American history and culture in order to assimilate into mainstream society. So much so that you see yourself more as American and no longer a Native American. I mean, what makes you a Native American now? Is it your blood? You know, I know a lot of cats that are blood. I don't know if that makes them blood. I know a lot of cats that aren't blood, but what they do and how they see others makes them blood, by that concept. Skin folk ain't always kinfolk. But if we could slowly, and this is from the perspective of the federal government, and I hope you all know that I've been speaking at times from that perspective, that these aren't my views, obviously. If we can get the kids, then we might reduce the fight. I mean, why would they fight us if they see themselves as us? Well, it's almost insidious to a degree. If we can reduce or eliminate their culture and replace what they see as their culture as our culture, then we'll reduce that conflict. At this time, I would like for you guys to underline the Dawes Act. Passed in 1887, it's going to break up tribal land and then redistribute it to natives, and other parts will be sold to whites. Now, as Americans are moving westward, there are attempts by private entities and the federal government because we need land. We need land to expand. We need land in order to develop industries. And we're trying to purchase the land, but much of Native Americans don't feel that they have ever really possessed the land or owned the land. We don't know whose it belongs to because their headspace has never been around the notion of ownership at all. That things are to be shared, things are to be used. So a communal way of life, private property is not uh, essential to the individual, maybe to the tribe or to the community. And this makes it difficult for Americans to wrap their head around. Like, what do you mean you don't own the land? What do you mean you don't have a contract? What do you mean this isn't in writing? What are you talking about? This makes no sense to us. I mean, it's difficult to speak French to somebody who speaks German. And if Americans have this headspace regarding private property, it's difficult to communicate or negotiate with someone who's operating in a communal property capacity. So Americans, they work their way into creating this situation where they, in essence, say, you know what, just give me all your land. Let me hold this real quick, and then here I'm going to give you 20 here, I'm going to give you 20 here, I'm going to give you 20 there, and then I'll take a little bit for myself, because it's obvious that you guys don't know how to control this. This is like a parent whose child received a lot of money, like let's say for their birthday. A little 6-year-old is just getting money for the birthday for some odd reason, 5 here, 10 here. And someone decides to give him a 20. Grandpa gets silly with it, gives him 100. And then the kid is like, well, I got all this money, Dad. I don't know what the hell. Like, well, let me count it. Dad counts up $200. My goodness, I don't know, 5-year-old kid gonna do it $200. First off, 5-year-old kid goes, well, how much money is it, Dad? And the dad goes, man, Dad, remember the dad counted $200. My goodness, boy, you got $100. What? And the kid's like, what? I got $100. Yeah, can you believe that? I was surprised too. It's like, but I'll tell you what, you're a little too young to hold this money. So how about I hold it, and when you need it, I'll give it to you. And I'll keep track of the adding, and it'll go all the way up to the 100. Does that sound good? Oh, thanks, you, Dad. I appreciate that. I knew you just looking out for me. I was like, oh, you know how it is. Dad's got your back. Now, in this Dawes Act, in the fact that they're acting in that capacity, they also say, hey, by the way, if you accept us kind of, holding, negotiating, and disseminating the land, I'll tell you what, we'll go ahead and make you American citizens. And isn't that what you've always kind of wanted to be in the first place? And then there's the audacity there. It's like, don't you want to be like us? In the half century after the passage of the Dawes Act, Native Americans will lose an additional 86 million of the 138 million acres of land that was in their possession at the time of its passage. They're going to lose 86 million of the 138 million that they control. Because times will change and people will find new ways to kind of take advantage of a situation, renege on this type of contract, that negotiation. And then unfortunately, it's not going to be until 1924 that all Native Americans will be identified as citizens of this country, as if they needed it. But apparently, this will be granted by the graciousness of the U.S. government. When we look at situations like the Dawes Act, legislation that's designed to benefit the majority of Americans and at the expense of who? Whether it's fair or this or that. I mean, it's obvious that this is it's not a hostile takeover, but it's definitely an exploitive situation. Whereas the Bureau of Indian Affairs might be significant because we're culturally reducing or eliminating threats to the American way of life. The Dawes Act is significant because we're physically reducing or eliminating their presence and restricting them to certain areas of the United States. And again, all of this is in an attempt to expand and benefit the American people, American industries, and the American government. At this time, I would like for you guys to underline the Gilded Age. Gilded, by definition, means covered with a layer of gold, suggesting a core of little value. Anytime you get anything gold-plated, why do we gold-plate anything? Well, because we want it to look good, even though the heart of the material may not be of that kind of value. So to think that there's a period of American history where we wanted things to look good, but in reality, the value was pretty problematic. And so the Gilded Age in America is a period of political corruption fueled by corporate profits and oppressive treatment of those in the way of expansion. So the Industrial Revolution will afford certain individuals to amass extraordinary amounts of wealth. You know, the Rockefellers, the Carnegies, the JP Morgans. These guys are living in a whole new atmosphere that when you made $1 billion, ladies and gentlemen, you brought home $1 billion. You know, there weren't taxes back then either. You know, like, you know, nowadays, you know, you work 40 hours, you get a paycheck, you're expecting based on your hourly rate by 40 hours to get this. But no, we all know that there are taxes, there are this, there are that. Well, back then, man, you made that money, that was your money. And so there's a lot of money that is being made now. You know, when we make money, you know, we want to be able to afford dinner that night. We want to afford a bed set, a car, our apartment, our home, whatever it may be. You know, we want to buy and treat ourselves to certain elements of life that we deem necessary or wants. Now, when you start making that funny money, that space money, you want to say, well, you know what? I'm going to buy an island. I'm going to buy a newspaper company. You know what? I'm going to buy Twitter. I'm going to buy a politician. I'm not buy a whole government. Why not? Some cats will entertain. Why not? Why have the money if I can't do those things? You know, at every level, you know, it doesn't matter if you make $12,000 a year, $20,000 a year, $40,000 a year, $50,000 a year. At every level, there's somebody that's saying, well, why not? Why not? Why not get 2 shirts? Why not get an extra order of sushi? I'm not going to finish it, but you know what? I'm just going to get it anyways. Well, there's another level, this 1%, where it's like, well, why not invest a lot of this money in this political campaign so I can ensure that a certain outcome is created that will ultimately benefit the interest of myself and my company. This, ladies and gentlemen, is known as the Gilded Age. At this time, I want you guys to underline political machines. I want you to underline Tammany Hall. And I want you to underline Boss Tweed. Yeah. So let's start off with political machines. Now, these are political organizations that were designed to organize votes and voters, usually in corrupt ways. The notion of political fairness, political play, the whole idea of politicking is to manipulate and strategize a situation to ultimately benefit a political candidate. Well, these machines were created to do the dirty work. And what that would afford the politician is the opportunity to appear clean, that their hands wouldn't be dirty, and therefore they could be the face or the front of various policies that might benefit in this quid pro quo interaction or exchange with various political machines. Now, you may ask, well, what are the types of ways in which they could corrupt voters? Well, they physically threaten them. You know, who are you voting for? Oh, I'm voting for this guy. Oh, are you? Okay, so we need you to vote over here. Well, why? Because I'm going to hurt you. Well, I don't care if you hurt me. We're going to hurt your kids. We're going to hurt your wife. We'll make sure that you can't work here anymore. And you're like, well, they can't do that. Today they can't do that. Back then, there were no rules. You could do a little bit of anything. You know, we have a tendency to look at other countries, who are in the origin stories of their democracy, and we have the audacity to point the finger and be like, look at the corruption, look at this and look at that, and those elections were rigged and this and that. And like, I mean, those individuals obviously don't know democratic history, because there will always be elements of that, especially in the United States, especially during this period. The whole purpose of the Gilded Age is to focus on the idea that corruption was rampant and that you had dead people voting and an odd number of, you had an all-time high of political participation during this period. And then for some odd reason, you look at political participation today, and it's, I mean, sometimes, less than 40% of the population is voting in local elections. Less than 70% of the population is voting in federal elections. But shoot, back in the day, 99%, 99%, 100%. And the numbers were, astronomical, because the numbers weren't real. And that's what political machines would do. The most significant, or I should say the most infamous political machine was located in New York, and it was called Tammany Hall. So political machines, that's the general term. Tammany Hall is the specific place led by the infamous Boss Tweed. His real name is William Tweed, but they call him Boss because what bosses do is they run the show. And so what Boss Tweed would do is he would hire a bunch of thugs, and they would intimidate people to vote a particular way. Because back in the day when you would go and vote, there wasn't secret ballots. Like you would walk into, there'd be a big building, two doors. One door said Democrat, one door said Republican. Imagine if those were the two parties, and you just got in line. And if Boss Tweed's goons saw you in the wrong line, well then they would go and make sure you got in the right line. Do you like your thumbs? Get back over there in the other line. Now here's another thing. Boss Tweed would be hired out by a company like, let's say, Andrew Carnegie. Okay, so let's observe how this works. Andrew Carnegie wants a particular person to become, let's say, the governor. Why? Because that governor will allow Andrew Carnegie to establish his company here, establish a plant there, exploit workers over here, something of that capacity. But he needs this guy to win. Well, you could make an argument, well, Carnegie will just give this guy donations. He could do that too, for sure. But then there's going to be this tie. There's a direct connection. If I gave you money, boom, there's a direct connection there. But how about instead of me giving you the money directly, I just simply give the money to a political machine, and then whatever that political machine does to benefit whichever political candidate they want, well, that's on them. That's their decision. Whatever. That has nothing to do with me. I was just giving the money to a political machine. And so now there's an indirect influence in that regard. And then again, the politician gets to keep his hands clean. It's like, I've never talked to Andrew Carnegie. I don't think we've ever even been in the same room. So then Andrew Carnegie will, lay down the information for Boss Tweed at Tammany Hall, let him know that this is kind of the results that we need. And then Boss Tweed then therefore goes out and makes it happen. Boss Tweed would go to the docks at not Paris Island, but or Angel Island, but in New York, as immigrants are coming in to New York City, as they're freshly getting off the boat, Boss Tweed would approach the immigrants and provide them with food, fuel, and jobs. And the immigrants were like, wow, man, America's great. We're here at the Statue of Liberty. And it seems like this is the land of opportunity and freedom. I haven't even been here a day. This guy's already giving me a job. He's giving me a place to stay. Yeah. Well, let me make this clear. I'm not giving you the place to stay. This is provided all by Andrew Carnegie. Oh, by the way, you'll be working for Andrew Carnegie. Oh, that's great. This guy sounds awesome. I got to meet this guy. They go to work. Andrew Carnegie gives them the day off to go and vote. I need y'all to go and vote. Oh, by the way, I need this particular candidate to win. And back in the day, you could say stuff like that. Today, of course, that would be illegal. Your employer telling you what needs to be expedient, because then they would say something like, well, if this particular candidate wins, then I'm going to have to lay a bunch of people off. Okay, well, that should be illegal. That's like indirectly influencing elections by an employer telling you, hey, you need to go vote this way, or vote, this is going to happen. But this is what would happen back in the day, and it would happen a lot. So the significance of political machines, the significance of Tammany Hall, the significance of Boss Tweed, is that they are all evidence. They are all evidence of political corruption taking place during the Gilded Age, and it's a problem that ultimately America is going to have to tackle, and we will eventually. However, there are still elements of this type of politicking and corruption that takes place today. Except instead of calling them political machines back today, we call them political action committees, PACs, and in some cases, super PACs, where individuals who may not have to be identified can invest large amounts of money into a super PAC. And then that super PAC acts on behalf of the federal government, of a political candidate, unbeknownst to them. Which is why sometimes you'll see an advertisement for a political campaign and said, paid for by, this is paid for by, Justin Roel, Salas. Or you may see this political campaign was paid for by the Political Action Committee of Family Affairs, something crazy like that. You never know. And that's how money influences elections nowadays, especially because there's no cap on the amount of money that can be in an election cycle, which is why we see these astronomical amounts that are being funneled into political campaigns. It's crazy that millions of dollars are being utilized for state representatives, state senators, let alone federal senators or federal representatives. We also have lobbyists. For every one politician in Washington, D.C., there are 4 lobbyists. What's a lobbyist? Well, a lobbyist is an individual that works on behalf of a company. They're called lobbyists because they wait in the lobby. The lobby of what? The lobby of Congress. Why do they wait there? Well, they're waiting for the politicians to come out. Well, what does that mean? Well, they want to talk to them. Okay, well, what's there to talk about? Well, the lobbyists would, they have money, they have resources, they have lunch tickets, they have valet parking, they have jets. We want to talk about the interest of our company. Now, wait a minute. Politicians are supposed to be at the behest and interest of the people. But if we've been paying attention to the Supreme Court, companies are people. Companies are people. Money is free speech. Welcome to America. Where it's this facade of political fairness. It's there. It's political corruption by another name.